Hello, hello, hello. It is 5 o'clock New York time, and this is Radio Free Wall Street, our everyday live streaming web TV broadcast about everything we want to talk about. Today's subject is Donald Trump again. He gets the prize, and we're going to talk about, no, not immigration. That is the Sunday news shows being dominated by that. And it's an important subject, but there's something even more. Donald Trump really wants to be in the headlines. He is the man, the guy. And he understands that the imperative for him to stay alive politically is to make sure that he is there, the subject of every conversation, drowning out the investigations and his former allies becoming his enemies, and the depth that Mueller's going through to bring him down. And in today's subject, I want to talk about what's more important than immigration in a lot of ways, although not morally, and that is the business of these sanctions. This past week saw a major ratcheting up in the war with Europe and Asia. Russia joined in the fray as more and more people, including the French, are announcing retaliatory sanctions against the United States. And this is growing. Now, as we analyze what's going to happen to the pork farmer, what's going to happen to grain, what's going to happen to steel producers, because remember, there's reverse retaliation. America exports a lot of finished steel products, and as you start tallying this, you realize that, whoa, this is going to be a big economic deal. This is going to affect a lot of businesses. This is just not an issue that is over there, but it's over here. And we're starting to count the price that's going to be paid by American businesses as this border war turns into a trade war, turns into an economic war. You cannot take the economics out of the politics and the politics out of the economics. You cannot look at this without understanding that, oh my God, this is going to be serious. Now, tariffs are an ugly thing indeed. And as I've long said to you, when goods and services don't flow across borders, armies do. Get people down there trading, getting them making money. Get the politicians out of the picture, and business will survive and business will prosper. Now you get the evil politicians in there, you get the greed, the fixing, and then it becomes complicated. Now, trade is in and of itself an ugly business. And tariffs are very, very political. Okay, let me explain. It is the political power bases of countries, the industries that are most favored, the people who are the most powerful, they get the most favorable tariff rulings, right? Politicians respond, who gives them the biggest payoff, vote. And the reality is that some industries are treated very fairly and some are treated very unfairly. Now, we've got Donald Trump, who's taken shots at Europeans and Chinese and Canadians and Mexicans. Even India announced that it's going to go ahead and start with tariffs against U.S. products. And all of a sudden, you realize the depth of this is growing by the day. And the seriousness is this is going to be a big deal. Before this is over with, this trade war will cost everyone. It'll cost the U.S. economy. It'll cost the global economy. It'll cost U.S. jobs, especially, interesting enough, in manufacturing. And, this is a situation that, calmer heads right now are not prevailing. Emotions are running pretty high. And I can tell you that in discussions we've had with people, they feel like it's time to teach Donald Trump a lesson. They're tired of being bullied around. They're tired of being pushed. They're tired of disrespect. And he's at the stage where a lot of this is getting very personal. People all of a sudden say, Donald, we're not going to take it. And we have tariffs grievance too. Now, there's no doubt about it that the U.S. gets the short end of the stick in many trade negotiations, okay? But that is not like simply we're innocent bystanders. It's because Americans really dominated a lot of industries. And we took advantage of the weakness in World War II. And we dominated the automobile industry. We dominated aircraft for a while. And now competition is rising up. So all of a sudden, what was extremely unfair tariffs towards the United States is just very unfair. Now, here's where the discussion comes in. Here's where you need to understand this. Okay, we're not treated right in trade. No doubt about it. We probably negotiated some bad trade deals. We did an awful lot of good ones. And remember that Americans dominated the industrial empire in the post-World War II era. And what's not being remembered by most people is that although we've lost manufacturing, as well we should have because of the cheap labor equation, we are really a powerhouse when it comes to especially computers, software, services, and what is a service sector calculation that doesn't include manufacturing. In other words, software is not a manufactured item, and neither is arts or entertainment. Neither is an Uber car or a Airbnb reservation service. Neither is a Facebook or a Google. And we absolutely control the narrative, we control the space, and we control the net revenue. And this means that people are starting to understand that they can start retaliating against our cell phone companies, like or smartphone companies like Apple. They can start retaliating against Google. And all of a sudden, the narrative changes in a way that's not realized. Now, there's another part of this thing that makes things very complicated, and that is the global supply chain. Anymore, things are not made in one place. And when you look at products, especially complex ones, the supply chain reaches around the world. And again, that is not taken into the calculation here. People do not realize how long supply chains are or how complicated they are. And tariffs fail to take that into consideration, okay? And many American companies are now warning that this entire crisis in trade is going to affect American manufacturing and American businesses, and it may not be the plus that Donald Trump wants it to be. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is a negotiation, that Donald Trump will back away, and this is the art of the deal. And my answer to you is that may be the case, but the damage may already be done. It's going to be hard once tariffs are put in place to drag people back to the negotiation table. And my great fear is the economic instability this causes at a time that the global economy is heading into a recession. Now, we already have a Latin American crisis building. We also have Africa, which is perennially a mess, but a bigger mess ever. A lot of African banks are in serious trouble. We now got a situation where in Asia, especially the weaker economies, are starting to tilt off the cliff. And we got a situation where the massive debt burdens of China could actually topple their economy. So we are kind of opening up here a Pandora's box. And I can tell you that we do not know what monsters will come out. What will happen to U.S. banks that have loaned vast amounts of money to enterprises around the world, okay? You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. What happens to U.S. companies that are looking for inroads? For example, banking is in the service sector, okay? U.S. banks, U.S. doing business, U.S. insurance companies are not calculated in the balance of trade services. And at the present time, U.S. banking and financial service companies, especially insurance companies, are trying to and starting to make inroads into China. Okay, so how many plastic dog shit bowls with a Tupperware top does it take for a place at the table in the Chinese very new and budding insurance industry? Most Chinese don't have medical insurance. Most Chinese don't have access to state-of-the-art medical services. Medicines is the same thing. There was the inroads of Western medicines into the Chinese economy is minuscule, and that is a great opportunity. Again, these are not things that are counted in automobiles and tires and cell phones and, like I said, plastic Tupperware bowls. And this is the grave mistake, and we've been warned for a long time that calculating balance of trade on a merchandise deficit basis will give you wrong information. And years ago when we started doing this and the calculations started becoming public, many people warned that this is going to end very badly. Now, past administrations have understood that there was inequity in the merchandise trade balances, no doubt about it. But what they failed to explain to you is that these profits or the balances are being plowed back in the U.S. economy. And what people fail to understand is that it gives us very much an edge, especially in the services, which again is not counted. So all of a sudden we are making the wrong calculation, and we are using the wrong tools to solve the problem. Trade has always been an issue, and trade is always complex. Now, one of the ways, it's kind of interesting, a lot of the balance of trade issues that you've heard so much about were dealt with in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Okay, for example, you've heard about the problem with milk and dairy, which has been a 400-year problem into Canada. So a lot of these things were settled business until we walked away from a very important partnership. Now we've got the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is income dominated in a vacuum created by China. You want to hear something really ugly? The agreement was to exactly stop the influence and the overbearing of Chinese in the Pacific region and give Europeans and Americans access to a lot of growing economies. That's off the table. Now you've got the Silk Road, and that is a massive trade route that bypasses the United States totally, which gives China access to all of Europe. And this route is not a route. If you think of it psychologically, it is a conduit by which goods will flow relatively duty-free. Again, America is not at the table. So we've made colossal mistakes in our trade policies. We have walked away from agreements that we shouldn't have, and we have put our industries at huge disadvantages. Now, those chickens are hung home the roof. Let's look at the automobile manufacturing segment, okay? Not as important to the U.S. economy as you might think, although there are a lot of jobs involved. They are jobs that are being lost by innovation, and they are jobs that will eventually be replaced by robotics. And in the areas where growth can be expected in programming, intellectual property with the Internet, with these social vehicles like Facebook and Google and online advertising, all of a sudden these are vehicles where trade can blossom. Let me explain. What is the conduit for a small business to get into, say, China? Non-existent. Where is a small mom-and-pop store going to sell their goods? Well, they are not going to be able to put together the vehicle, the websites, the delivery, the fulfillment centers. And this is where the big Internet presences are making great inroads. And remember, they're carrying along with them a huge amount of smaller U.S. businesses that don't have access. And what's critical is that they have access to these markets, and they're gaining share. Okay, kind of like the eBay phenomenon as it goes international. But do not ignore the power of that. Do not ignore the power of partner programs where a lot of Internet sites do the advertising, the marketing, and where smaller manufacturers, smaller businesses then fulfill and sell the products. And this is a great way for access to international markets that, again, it's not even being counted in the balance of trade deficit situation or being talked about in trade negotiations. I'm talking about the Uber. I'm talking about the people who are on partner programs with mass Internet marketers. This is the future. The future is not in coal mining. The future is not in steel mills. The future is not in automobile assembly plants. It's just not there, folks. It's not going to happen. As much as you'd like to hear about it, as much as you get the blow and go, reality is that is of an era that is no more. That is a time that has gone by. And the biggest problem we have with trade negotiations, especially being done by Donald Trump, is by a 70-year-old man who has a perspective that comes from the dark ages. You know, the future is what happens with Baidu and Alibaba and what happens with Amazon's movement into international transactions in international markets. How does a U.S. company get to retail in China? Well, you're not going to go down to a convention and put up your little booth and do it. You're going to do it by the supply chains that are being set up by these major retailers. Alibaba is allowing a lot of U.S. companies access to the Chinese market. Baidu, again, is allowing access. It's all about who gets to these people. It's all about the algorithms that drive the sales. It's all about presenting your products. Way, way, way out of the job description and the depth of companies that produce products that really will be wanted in China, but have no way of doing this. So there's a quiet revolution going on as U.S. companies especially are able to start getting in partner programs and starting to get into distribution channels that stretch around the world. Let me say something to you. One of the things that's most remarkable is how poor a job American manufacturing, American retailing, American service companies do in selling offshore. If you go and talk to English businessmen, they understand how to market in the United States. They understand how to market into India and China. They really understand how to market into Europe. And they're much more diversified in their ability to get access to the markets. American companies, manufacturers, retailers, service providers are really, really, really decades behind the move. Hang on a second. Time for some green tea. Hang on a second. Thank you. So these are major inroads that ground was being made much quicker than anybody realized. FedEx, for example, has a huge supply chain vehicle that involves shipping into and out of China. They're going to be hit with severe sanctions. Boeing manufactures parts all around the world. Wing assemblies, for example, are made out of England. And these are companies that have extended a very complex supply chain. Hewlett-Packard, Apple Computers, legendary for its Chinese and outsourcing around the world for its parts. When you really look at the products that are the cutting edge of technology, you would be amazed at where the parts and the sub-assemblies are made. And they're not necessarily China. They're Vietnam, they're India, they're Asia, they're Europe, Turkey, and Japan. And these become a unifying products that are basically traded duty-free. Yeah, the thing that's interesting is that when you look at the makeup of duties on parts and assemblies that are crossing borders, the old products like automobiles, aluminum and steel, all get subject to heavy duties and big confrontation. But in the new age products, in the things that represent the service economy, in the things that represent sub-assemblies, complex technology, highly specialized parts, guess what? They travel around the world completely duty-free and become important components in complex things. If you've ever looked at a modern, say, digital camera, you have a lot of the focusing motors, the lens systems, the motors and servos that adjust the focus in and out, and a lot of pieces of those technologies, including sensor chips and those kind of things, they're made all over the world. And a lot of them are U.S. companies' technology, proprietary patents that drive these things. So it is simplistic to follow a man like Wilbur Ross's analysis of what's fair trade and what's not. They're looking at very old technologies from the 19th century. And the decision was made by enlightened people to let that go, okay? Steel is not going to be an equation, or aluminum, of the economies of the future. Coal is gone, okay? Cooking coke. These are things that were fought about, in the olden days, really, really olden days. Now we're looking at the modern service economy. We are looking at brand new technologies of high-capacity materials, for example, exotic sciences. And these are all things the U.S. excels at. And what's happening is, although we have long ago lost the trade war in automobiles and steel and aluminum and these old-time products, when it comes to the new age stuff, hey, we own them. We own them. Okay, you would not believe. I mean, there's not a a mobile phone in the world that cannot operate without U.S. technology, okay? U.S. technology that royalties are paid on. Now, of course, there's cheating. Of course, there's theft. But it isn't impossible or unbelievable or unfathomable that you can't detect that theft. In other words, when you get the competitor's phone, it's pretty easy to engineer and see which one of your patents have been violated, which technologies are there, and there's been some substantial fights and a lot of movement on that. Now, the beauty about it is that technologies proliferate quickly. And I'm a holder of a large number of patents, and I can tell you that getting paid on your patents is the damnedest thing you can ever imagine. And I can also tell you that patents build on one another. You know, when you put out your patent application, you're quoting 20, 30 other patents, and all of a sudden as the tree grows, people grow upon your patents. That's why patents have an expiration date. In other words, we want technologies to proliferate. We want science to grow. We want the total global economy to move forward. And we want to reward people who are innovating quicker. And we don't want to give old technology dominance where they stifle growth. A great example is AT&T. AT&T basically gave you a choice of colors of phones. The biggest innovation, if you remember, was the Princess phone and push button. Well, it basically held back the telecom industry. It was unbelievable. And what happened was they were forced to give up their patents. Now, let's talk about some AT&T patents that were proprietary. Fiber optics was an invention of AT&T. Integrated circuit, even the transistor was a telephone switching tool at first. Lasers and down fiber optics, all technologies. And when the technologies were unlocked as part of the settlement with AT&T because they really were a monopoly, well, the world changed. The world changed very quickly. So it is not such a bad idea to have trade people duking it out over proprietary rights. It's not such a bad idea that as technology proliferates, new technology is born. And this idea of trade theft, well, let me tell you, U.S. companies have stolen as much technology as has been stolen from them. You've got a situation that, especially with Internet kind of things, the amount of theft by U.S. companies of Internet, digital, new age products is legendary, okay? Microsoft was famous for it, the thousands of suits and companies they put out of business. So don't be so much fooled by the rhetoric. We don't have the purest hands in the world on this either. But what you need to do is not stop progress. In other words, you can get bogged down in these technological warfare, cross-border issues, and you forget that, you know, airplanes of the future are not going to be made of aluminum. You know, it's funny. We're talking about the technology of aluminum, and Donald Trump has claimed that because the aluminum industry is being sacrificed and we don't have companies that make aircraft aluminum in America. Hey, Donald, buddy, Kevlar. Hello, Kevlar, we invented it. You know, there's not going to be any aluminum airplanes anymore, buddy. You probably didn't know that, right? Well, so you've got a situation where a lot of these things we're fighting over are just not going to be there in the future, okay? We are not going to generate electricity with coal. I doubt we'll have many nuclear power plants. I know we're not going to go to solar and wind, by the way. But the reality is that we will go to natural gas. And so we are changing technologies. Oh, by the way, we're one of the countries that dominate natural gas and natural gas turbines. So don't be so fooled by the rhetoric or the evil intent of Donald Trump. In other words, when you watch what he's doing, realize that these are not necessarily battles that really invigorate America. These are battles that are pinpointed to states that Donald Trump needs to win in order to stay in power in the midterm elections. And when you kind of look at the Ohio manufacturing guys and the Pennsylvania steel producers and the Kentucky coal miners, you realize Donald Trump hasn't said anything about international banking rules. Donald Trump hasn't said anything about our insurance industry breaking overseas. Donald Trump hasn't said anything about new technologies, okay? The cloud developments, for example. And so when you analyze what he's doing, it's not about making America great again. Putting immigrant children in jail, separating from their mothers, does not make America great again. Not granting refugee status to people who are leaving Latin America on the torment of gangs and narco-terrorists sponsored by states does not do them or us any good. You want to hear a secret? We really need that very cheap labor. We always have. Okay, Chinese immigrants built the railroads. Irish immigrants built the brick buildings of America. And so it goes. So when we wake up and smell the coffee, you realize that this is about hate speech. This is about dividing people along ethnic boundaries and economic ones. The trade war is the same thing as the immigration policy. In other words, when you really look at this thing, and you analyze Donald Trump's immigration policies, they're not benefiting American businesses. We really desperately need this dirt cheap labor doing jobs Americans won't take and don't have to. Thank God, we've grown. But a job that we don't want to take, a position that Americans don't want to fill, is a perfect opportunity for a young migrant and a young migrant family to come to America and break into the American dream. It's always been the case in America, okay? And it's the same thing with trade. By foregoing some of trade sanctions that we could legally take, by foregoing some and looking the other way, what have we done? Well, we've changed the world, okay? What would China look like if we hadn't opened up trade with them? What would the world look like if Reagan hadn't demanded that they topple the wall? Do you realize the suffering and amount of money it took by the German people to unify the East and West? I was there for that. I can tell you that there was 10 long years of integrating these people who had nothing into the culture. And now, well, what happened? Germany went from a pretty important manufacturing center, but not a dominant one, to a major manufacturing export powerhouse. And a lot of that was on the backs of really highly educated people who had nothing, who had no idea about the future, who came in there. German car companies are run by immigrants from Turkey. When you kind of back up and you calm down and take a deep breath here, you realize that machete-swinging MS-13 gang members are not the majority. They are not as big a crisis, and they are being stepped on as they should be. But what's happening is the collateral damage. We are creating an impoverished Latin America that gets poorer by the day and more violent. We are creating more and more desperate people, and there's no safety valve. And it's the same thing in trade. By putting up these trade barriers, okay, by getting involved in these stupid-ass trade wars over steel and aluminum that doesn't really count for much, we are really, really not creating a lot of jobs. We are really, really not making manufacturing America great again, because that's not where the economy is going. That's not the global direction. And when you sit back calmly and rationally, and it tells you, analyze, you go, hey, whoa. We're not even beginning to deal with the areas of real growth in trade. We're not really dealing with robotics, for example, which we lead the way in, or automation, or sophisticated high-tech materials. And so all of a sudden, you're concentrating on the guy that made the little cheap Sony camera, but you're forgetting about the guy that put it into a doorbell lighting system. It's $1 billion company. In other words, let them make their pennies. Let them fight over the last dime in price on the manufacturing side. Because the really big money is made in integrating the Chinese devices, which are dirt cheap, into more complicated structures. Remember that supply chain I'm talking about? If you take apart a lot of the miraculous products that are around you every day, they're chock full of Chinese and India and Vietnam and Malaysian-made parts that they fight over for pennies. But the big profit margin is in that unified device sold as a concept that changes technology. when you realize that a lot of these companies that are really the biggest companies in America, they don't make the products they sell. Never have. They've designed them. They've engineered them. They've signed factories assembled for them. But that's the pennies. You know, the way I put it is that Chinese companies get the jobs of providing stuff at cutthroat margins, while American companies get the profits. When you understand that, then you understand how truly misguided not only our immigration policy is, but also our trade policy. This is not the way to do it. This is not how a great country operates. We dominate the world in the technologies of the future. So let them have the damn cars. I mean, let them have the hand assembly work. We don't want those jobs anyway. Let's put our people together at the high-paying, high-quality, futuristic exploration in robotics and artificial intelligence. Who knows where the Internet's going to go? You know, we're about to have the 5th generation 5G. 5G will allow massive amounts of data to be available everywhere, wirelessly. It'll allow devices that will be online. I mean, a key will be a thing of the future, a thing of the past, okay? For the future, your cell phone, your smart device is going to be your bank, your wallet, your keychain. Think about it. It's going to monitor your heart. It's going to keep you alive. It is going to protect you from villains. I mean, the technology breakthroughs that are here are phenomenal. And we're arguing about the stupid shit. I don't give a damn who makes the sneakers. I don't care who makes the cold roll. I don't care where the I-beams or rebar come from. It's not the future. I don't care about the aluminum. It's not going to be used. You know, it's funny. We're talking about the integration of how important aluminum is because it's starting to move into cars. Well, we're going to hop, skip, and jump past aluminum and get into Kevlar. Kevlar in the aviation industry is revolutionizing the weight of airplanes, the efficiencies, how much fuel it takes to push the damn thing, how high they can fly and how fast. There's a revolution going on all around you, and our leadership's worrying about steel. Who cares? Aluminum, ditto. Coal, oh my God. We're not even talking about the cloud. We're not even talking about using the internet sales as a way to get access to markets. See, we're sneaking in these markets in the back door anyway. Our technology is going in there. Our films are going there. Our games are going in there. Our entertainment is going in there. Our fashion design is going there. We already rule the thought process of mankind. I'm going to repeat that. We may not control the steel. We may not control the aluminum or the coal. But the thought process, it's ours. The social media is ours. The devices that communicate and do wonderful things like being your wallet, all America. Okay? We dominate that. We own them. They run on Android. They run on Apple. You know, they run on systems that we own, control, proliferate. And guess what? Let them steal last week's technology. You want to know why? Because we're producing new technology so fast that they're always going to play catch-up. We can win this game, but not by how we're going about it. The same thing with the immigration issue. Create a safety valve. Bring them in with their kids. Treat them good. Make them healthy. Make them love you. They will work to death for you for no money at all, and they will solve a lot of our problems because you know what? The average age of Americans is 38 years old. The average age of Latin America is 18.